President Biden recently declared Kenya as the major non-NATO ally, in part to curb Russian and Chinese influence on the African continent. But if the Biden administration truly wants to improve U.S.-African relations, the answer is simple. Stop doing bad aid and instead start doing good business. Let me say that again. Stop doing bad aid and just do good business. It's truly that simple. So let me explain more. We have to stop doing bad aid. There was a story recently where U.S. aid donated food to Tanzania, and the Tanzanian farmers rightfully spoke up and said, please don't do that. We are already growing those crops. You are taking away our jobs and our income. And the U.S. fired back that that food had been enriched and there had been value added, and that's why they donated it instead. And then, of course, the Tanzanians spoke up and rightfully said again, okay, but we could add that value. We could do the value addition ourselves. And if they would have been allowed to do that value addition, they would have created jobs and income. And when people have jobs and money, they don't need donated food. So the number one thing we have to stop doing is bad aid, especially aid that is taking away jobs and opportunities from local communities. People don't want aid, they want trade. And that brings me to my second point, which is all we have to do is good business. Now, the African continent is called the last frontier for a reason. There's so many great business opportunities, and I can mention just a few of them in this video. For example, we could import more fair-made products from the African continent. Now, notice I said fair-made, not fair trade. The difference is that fair-made focuses on value-added products. For example, importing a chocolate bar instead of the raw cacao. Not only does this create more jobs on the continent, but it usually also supports the environment better. So if you want to learn more about that, you can go to a website like fairmadeisbetter.com to learn more about why we should be focusing in on fair-made products. But for the purposes of this video, I want to focus on plugging African professionals into the global talent economy and into remote positions in U.S. companies. For example, instead of hiring a VA from the Philippines, you could hire a VA from Kenya. Or instead of hiring your next developer from India, you could hire a developer from Ethiopia instead. So let me explain why that's such a great thing. And if you're first thinking, oh, outsourcing takes jobs away from Americans, it does not. So please see my video about that. If the Biden administration could incentivize U.S. business to hire from the African continent, it would actually support small and medium businesses in the U.S. because it gives them access to more affordable talent. So, for example, they can hire an admin assistant, a cold caller, or somebody that's going to help grow their business and make them stronger and more competitive. This would also create jobs in the African countries, making it a win-win for everybody. Now, if you didn't know, before I started Cradle, I used to work for another U.S. outsourcing company, and this was when I lived in Ethiopia. And I remember a time when Ethiopia was pretty disgruntled with the U.S. government, and rightfully so. And so protests arose outside the U.S. embassy. But if you ask me how many of our virtual assistants or cold callers or developers went to that protest, it would be 0. No one left the office. Why? One, because they had a job to do and they were focused on working and making money and doing a great job for the clients. But also, in my own opinion, is when you start to match people and build those relationships, both sides are able to look past the stereotypes and the political drama and see real people and work together in a healthy partnership. In a way where you don't have to protest outside their embassy, but instead you can get to know each other and start to build better relationships from there. Now, I've been to 13 African countries during my backpacking trip across Africa, and I also lived in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia for 8 years. And what I saw is that pretty much every country in the world is starting to do business with African countries except the US. Because we tend to view African countries in terms of charity, we want to start a nonprofit in Africa instead of starting a business. And because of that, we are becoming irrelevant. Now, when I look at my friends, especially those in Ethiopia who are exporters, they want to do business with Saudi Arabia and China, and for good reason, because those countries are actively trying to do business with African countries. And you can say whatever you want. You can say that there's something bad happening, or you could be mad about Chinese influence in African countries. But at the end of the day, they're so much more open to business with the African continent than we are. And when I lived in Ethiopia for 8 years, I truly don't know what US aid did. There's very little that I could point to and say, yes, US aid positively contributed to this. But at least in Chinese defense, I can look at this bridge or that building or that road and say the Chinese built that. And in the end, that indirectly supported jobs in the community and supported business initiatives. So what I've seen is that African countries are sick of aid. Nobody wants aid. It's never been a way that any country has gotten out of poverty. Instead, everybody just wants to do good business. And so as the US government starts to think about creating better relationships in Africa, we should not look to aid. We should not choose one special country. Instead, we should just open our minds up to doing good business with African countries in a way that creates mutual win-wins. And that is the path forward, and that is the best path forward.